Okay, so I've started the recording. Welcome. This is the official beginning of the meeting, and glad you guys could be here. You know, this is to discuss the issue with the possible addition of a rolling gate and fencing to the area south of 6th Street at Carpinteria Creek to kind of separate the State Beach housing there. You know, there's few enough of us that I don't think it's that big a deal. I was going to go through some like guidelines for the meeting and staying muted and stuff like that. I don't think we have to worry about that. I had shared already before officially starting the meeting, but Mario, you hadn't heard this yet. So this morning I had a phone call with Cesar Romo, the state park supervisor, that I know some of you have spoken to personally. I've only talked to him by phone. And he wanted me to make clear that as of this time, there is no project pending. There is no plan in progress to add this gate or this fencing to the area south of 6th Street. It was, you know, sort of preliminary discussions. There was a project on the shelf that he inherited when he started working there from 5 years ago, he said. Well, here, let's let Rebecca in, and then I can continue with the sort of preamble. And Tom, if you just want to go ahead and keep letting people in, we'll tap dance here for a minute. If people are still trickling in, we can, you know, I want to get everybody in, and then we can talk about this latest development. Hello, Virginia. Thank you for joining us. You're muted currently, but you should be able to unmute yourself. I had the meeting configured to mute people upon entry, which may have been overkill in hindsight.
No. I just couldn't find my correct headset, so I'm all set now.
Excellent. Okay, well, just to kind of recap, since we're starting, we already started a few minutes ago, but I want to make sure I cover this ground for everyone who's here. I'm recording the meeting and intended to make this recording available in the future for people who had questions about it. So this is not a private discussion amongst ourselves, but it's potentially a public discussion that other people will be seeing in the future. So I just wanted people to be aware of that. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that I had a phone call this morning with the state park supervisor, Cesar Romo. And he said that as of this point in time, there is no pending project to add this fencing or this rolling gate to the area south of 6th Street. So it is not a project at this time. The concerns that this was something that was going to be happening after the first of the year are baseless at this point. I mean, again, I don't know exactly where that information came from. I think it came from people talking to him in the past week or so. But as of this point in time, they are not pursuing that. So there are concerns they have about access to the site, and the residents there have concerns about safety, and we can talk about that. But in terms of an imminent threat of fenced off loss of access to the birding there, we can, I don't know, quiet the alarms. It sounds like it is not going to be an issue, at least in the immediate future. So with that said, we could still have a meeting to discuss it. I know people's time is important to them. Maybe it would be a briefer meeting than it otherwise might have been if we thought we were gearing up to have a big pitched battle against a loss of access to this birding habitat. I'm curious what people think about that. I don't want to just be me going, talking on and on. So if any of you have feedback you want to offer, I'd be happy to hear it. Yeah, Rob, go ahead and unmute yourself, or if you can't, let's see, I can ask to unmute, it says. Yeah, you need to unmute your Zoom call there, Rob. There you
go. I really appreciate your pursuing this to the extent that you did, and I think it helped quiet things down if they knew people were taking it seriously. I sent you an email 10 minutes ago, and not specifically about the proposed fencing, but just remembering that ideally a path along the east side of the bank would be great, because in the mornings you'd have the sun at your back. And I remembered that when we first started the CBC, I spoke to the owner of that property to get access, and he was definitely not amenable to that. He had had a fight with Audubon a year or two before about putting. The reason I'm bringing him now is I don't know if he's still the owner, and I don't know if he's still alive. So it would be good in terms of CBC thinking to maybe explore that as another possibility. The other thing is there is a sort of a path along the West Bank between 6th Street and the sewage treatment plant. And I think it'd be a great idea if we could get permission for a crew of us to go in there and improve that path and clear it, get rid of as much poison oak as we could, and also make it easier access to step down from 6th Street down to that great spot where you can sit for an hour and see who comes in.
Yeah. You know, it's an ongoing issue. Yeah, I mean, I had heard that about the access to the eastern shore of the creek, south of 6th Street, that property owner became very, you know, became inflexible on that point, that access had existed at a certain point in time and then was lost. You know, again, I want to, I mean, yeah, that's certainly interesting, and I'll be pursuing that as part of the Christmas bird count organizing. But I think for this meeting, I'd like to just, if I can, just keep it focused on this potential project that sounds like now is not a project, and what we should be doing at this point or going forward in terms of that specific site, that, you know, that west side, that grassy strip south of 6th Street. And one thing that that Cesar Romo said to me in the course of this phone call I had with him today was that, you know, tensions are high amongst the state park residents there, or at least some subset of them. There is, you know, at least one of those residents who views that as their front yard, and that, you know, bird watchers walking through it is upsetting to them. So he pointed out that, well, you can access that section of the creek from the south side. That is, you could, you know, I guess park on Palm Avenue or come in via the state park, and, you know, it'd be discontinuous with the part upstream. But he mentioned that as an option that he would encourage people to use. You know, I think my own kind of bottom line sense of this is that I want to be for myself, and I'm not saying this has to control anyone else's actions in the area, but for myself, I want to be a good neighbor. You know, I want them to be okay with bird watchers being there. I do think there's a strong case to be made that we should have continued legal access to that, and that if push came to shove and this ended up being a coastal commission issue, that, you know, we might have some basis there for asserting that. But, you know, I think the best of all possible worlds is if we don't have to get all involved in that. And maybe the experience of the last week kind of reinforces that for me, that, you know, a lot of people put a lot of energy into this response, like, oh my gosh, we're losing access to this really key piece of birding habitat. This is an outrage. This is an outrage. We need to not have this happen. You know, it sounds like that was helpful maybe in terms of clarifying that, oh, this project is not going to be happening in the near future, that the fact that people cared about it enough to make some noise quickly may have helped. I don't know that for a fact. That's just me trying to read between the lines of the sequence of events. But, you know, to the extent we can keep this on a low key basis, or, you know, maybe mend some fences, or let some of the escalated rhetoric subside, and I'll take a deep breath and let it cool off a little bit, that might be in all of our interests in terms of just having low effort access to that site. But again, that's just, you know, my perspective. I'd be happy to hear other people's perspective. I don't know, I did want to, I had planned to kind of go around and do brief introductions, and maybe it would be worth doing that to the extent we're going to have a conversation. So it's not just me assuming that everybody knows everybody. I'm John Callender. I'm one of the people who founded Carpinteria Birdwatchers. I'm currently the organizer of the Carpinteria Christmas Bird Count, having taken the reins from the very capable Rob Denholtz, who's also in the meeting, and established the Christmas Bird Count in Carpinteria, and ran it for many years. And, you know, I learned about this because people were emailing me saying, hey, you know, this guy approached us and said there was going to be a fence going in here. So that was where I got involved in it. And just one sort of minor side point, I am a member of the Carpinteria Planning Commission, but in this matter, I'm acting very much as a private citizen. This is not does not reflect the views of the city of Carpinteria or of the Planning Commission. And if there was a project there that did need a coastal development permit that came before the Carpinteria Planning Commission, I would probably be inclined to recuse myself from it, just because, you know, by being involved in this action, I've kind of created the potential for people to think I'm you know, biased, and I'm fine with, you know, stepping down. So that aside, that's who I am. That's where I'm coming from. Virginia, I you know, invited you to be part of this. Would you be willing to kind of share just briefly what your background is, or why you're what your interest is in this project or this potential project? So we need you to unmute. There you go.
Yeah, sure. As you've been speaking, I know I was looking away. I have my iPad here and I've been looking at the Google Earth aerial view of just refreshing my memory of some of the features of the areas that we're talking about. So my background is that at one point in my career, I worked for the Coastal Commission for a number of years. And then I went from there to working for the local district of state parks, which is the Channel Coast District, which includes Carpinteria State Beach. And since moved on, haven't worked there since 2004, which sounds like a really long time ago. But I still work with state parks a lot in my current capacity. I actually work, I'm working from home in Goleta, at my job at the Delta Protection Commission, which is a very small state agency up in Sacramento. And my interest is, for a number of years, I was a co-conservation chair with Santa Barbara Audubon. And I stayed on the email chain so that I can sort of try to keep track of what everybody's up to. And I thought perhaps I could offer some assistance. I don't know Cesar Romo. I'm familiar with his name. I think the one, well, I'll offer my comments separately, but anyway, that's who I am and where I've been somewhat.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. And thanks for being part of it. Rob, Lindsay, can you share briefly who you are?
Yeah, I'm a member, I'm one of the board members of the local chapter of the Audubon Society, and I'm here at the request of leadership to see what happens in this meeting and to advocate on their behalf for continued access to the site.
Awesome. And Tom Belen? Muted.
I'm from Carpinteria, and I'm just and I'm a bird watcher, and I'm interested in this. I did meet Cesar Romo out there, and so we just want to support being able to access the area. But I understand some of some of the issues with people walking through their front yard, but that's all right. So anyways, that's who I am.
Thanks. Rob? The other Rob Denholtz?
Yeah, well, I know everybody except Virginia. Hi, Virginia. I don't really have much to say, except that, of course, I'm concerned. I bird Carp Creek frequently, and happy I'll still be able to, at least for the foreseeable future. That's about it for me.
Okay, and Mario? So you unmuted and I didn't hear anything, and then you muted again. So you may have some microphone issues. You're unmuted now, but I'm not hearing anything. All right, well, hey everyone, this is Mario Barunda. He's a Carpinteria bird watcher. He was one of the people I know who's had conversations with the folks down there at the state park housing because he emailed me about it. I don't know if you have input, Mario, you could maybe make it via the chat, the text chat feature, or work on your microphone setting. We're not hearing you. I'm not not getting any audio from you, even though it shows you as unmuted. Anyway, okay, well, those are all the people I see here who have cameras on. If anyone else, wants to give input, we have, it looks like Rebecca Coulter may be watching with the camera off, but that's fine.
She just unmuted. Yeah, here we go.
Hey, hi, Rebecca.
Hey, sorry about that. I forgot I was off.
No, it's okay.
I am the compiler for the Christmas bird count in Santa Barbara, and same reasons as everybody else, interested in the access. I'm also really interested in maybe ways that we can help mitigate proactively with Audubon signage or something that speaks to birders entering the area, just to shift their attention to, make sure that they're aware that we're in people's backyards and whatnot, and just to maybe proactively, that just popped into my mind that might be a way we could approach the start of this to help maybe lower some of the hot tempers and whatever's going on with it. I don't know all the particulars, but I'm interested.
Yeah, I'm very sympathetic to that view myself. And that is my hope that the main value of this meeting, I think at this point is maybe we can discuss that a little bit and figure out, if there's things we can do going forward. Okay, well, that's the introductions. I did want to briefly just share my screen and kind of use a little Google Earth view that like Virginia was looking at separately, so we can all be on the same page. And then people watching this video after the fact, would get a chance to see what it looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. I will share my screen here. All right, so if I've done this correctly, you should be seeing the Google Earth view or the Google Maps view. And so here's Carpinteria Creek, and sort of looking, well, actually, let me do this. We'll go back to a regular map view and zoom out so you kind of get oriented. So here's Carpinteria, and then as you zoom in on it, this green band is the really awesome riparian habitat of Carpinteria Creek, which is never channelized. It's got a lot of big trees. It's really one of the best intact pieces of riparian habitat, at least in this corner of the county. And it's been birded very actively since 1978, I understand from Paul Lehman's email. So I had said at one point, I know it was at least 25 years that I've been going there. At one point I mistakenly said 50 years, but the official start of the really intensive birding along this section of the creek was 1978. So it's been 42 years that it's been actively birded, and pretty continuously, from that time. And then as we zoom in on it, the area in question that we're talking about, let's see, where are we here, is, okay, so you can drive in to this area along 6th Street, which is this street right here. And then the creek is winding along here on the east side of that. There's a preschool here, the Lou Grant Parent-Child Workshop. And that issue is, so now we're going to turn and look towards the south. So there's going to be the ocean off in the distance. At issue is this little grassy lawn right here that you come in and you park here, and in order to access the southern part of the creek, it is, depending on the state of the creek, how much water is in it, it can require you to walk along this grassy margin here, the edge of the riparian habitat, and then you can't see it in this view, but there's a way to kind of duck through this little corner here. And then there is, in fact, a concrete embankment. It has less vegetation now than in this view. The big storms a few years ago scoured a lot of the vegetation away. But you can basically walk the top of this concrete embankment just outside the fencing for the Carpinteria Sanitary District plant here, and have a view of what becomes sort of the estuary area at the southern end of the creek. And then you go further, and after very carefully crossing the railroad tracks here, you can get down into the State Beach campground and the mouth of the creek here and the ocean and the beach. So it's a really fabulous piece of birding habitat. It tends to get a lot of rare birds, so it gets a lot of attention from bird watchers in the fall and other times of the year as well. Certainly in the winter, the Christmas bird count folks are actively in there trying to stake out rare species that we can get for the Christmas bird count. Yeah, Rob Lindsay, I see you have your hand up.
I'm sure you're probably about to get here, but where the fence be located if it would be put in?
So, and I'm going to zoom into the street view imagery here. So here we are at the end of 6th Street, looking away from the creek. And here we are looking towards the creek. This parking along the edge here is where they park for the Lou Grant preschool and where birders a lot of the time will park. And this is the view from there of this grassy lawn. My understanding is that as of a week or so ago, birders at the site were being contacted by Cesar Romo, the state park supervisor, and were told at that time that there were plans, although I'm using that word carefully because I've been told there were no plans, so take that with an asterisk. But at least as of a week or two ago, we're being told to expect that there would be a fence added basically along, and my interpretation of what I heard was along this edge, the near edge of that grassy strip, and that there would also be a rolling gate created across the entrance to the parking area for the State Beach employee housing, which is what is off to the right here. If we zoom out again, I've been very focused on the birds and the creek, but these buildings here are employee housing for the state park. And Cesar Romo lives there currently. There are at least a few other people who live there currently, including some families with young children. And it's my understanding that there was some turnover in who was living in there as of a few years ago, and that was possibly a factor in the recent increase in sensitivity to people walking across this strip, that there's people in there, or at least one person in there who is concerned enough about it to confront people and say, hey, you're walking through our front yard and I'm concerned about safety and my children, so don't do that, or we're going to stop you from doing that. But my understanding is that that's where that fencing would go. And in the discussions that I had with Cesar Romo, I had talked about, well, what if we had fencing that went through the grassy area here and kind of separated the more private areas to the right from the creekside habitat on the left, and then the birders could continue to use that corridor next to the riparian habitat. He wasn't opposed to that idea. It sounded like, that seemed like a solution that might work. But if we're not doing fencing at this point, regardless, it's kind of a moot point, at least for now. So any questions? Yeah, Virginia, I see you got your hand up.
I'm going to have to dodge off because I did actually have another a conference call that I can come in late to. But anyway, I wanted to quickly mention a couple things.
Sure.
I think Rebecca sort of touched on it. My suggestion is, over the long term, is that there actually be a proposal. I think it would be great if Audubon could be sort of spearhead it. You definitely want to be respectful of the fact that these are residences of state park employees. While it's really great to have a residence very close to where you work, it's also very difficult because you're it's like living in a fishbowl, as you folks can imagine. You don't have a lot of privacy. And so there is frequently a sensitivity around residence areas. That said, my suggestion would be to maybe sit down with both so I believe that Cesar is the maintenance supervisor. Okay. I could be incorrect, but I believe that. And then sit down with Greg Martin, who's the superintendent for the whole district. And maybe one of the environmental scientists. I don't recall exactly who does carp. I think it might be Alexis Frangis, but it might also be one of the other. Nat Cole is the main environmental scientist. And I think it would be a really great idea to think about trying to actually create a very separated area that would be an access way that would preserve the access, because it sounds like it is a very popular, very widely known access way amongst birders. And I think it would be better to not just to sort of let sleeping dogs lie, so to speak. If it goes away, but it could come back again. So that would be my suggestion, is to sit down and say, hey, we would be open to, going and looking for grant funding, or I think there's probably a number of different pots of money that could be used for something like this, that would make it into an access way that could be permanent, and also that would preserve the privacy. So it would involve some sort of really good screening wall, whatever it would be for the residence area. And it would also maybe be a little more aesthetically appealing, shall we say. So it would be tricky to do because it is probably within the flood zone. But with the right approach and the right kind of planning, I think that would be the best long-term solution that I would suggest. And it might be involving, you guys have a really vibrant community of folks who could easily participate in something like this. Now, it's going to end up being a little bit more than anybody really wants to get involved with. But I think it's really would be kind of a fantastic project, actually.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Virginia. And I appreciate, your input, and I understand if you have to get off, and, we'll probably continue the discussion a little longer, but thanks. I think that is a great idea. I know that the city of Carpinteria, the Parks and Recreation director there, Matt Roberts, has for many years had plans of an expanded trail network through the area, including a trail along Carpinteria Creek. And,
Yep.
it's tricky access questions and private property ownership and, easements, and how do we get the trail built there. They are doing a project I know I heard about recently, kind of up closer to Carpinteria Avenue. So, little pieces of it are happening, but it'd be great to have
Well,
it
I
integrated.
think when this came up again when we did the 6th Street Bridge too, a few years ago. I was
The
at the
8th
time
Street
I was
Bridge, right?
working for, or yeah, right. I was working for a consulting company at the time, and I was involved with that from the consulting side.
Yeah.
But I know Matt Roberts well. I'm very fond of him, and I think that he's got a really good, he's got a good head on his shoulders, good vision. And I would say definitely if he hasn't retired, get him involved too.
Yeah.
Because I think he would be helpful, and he's familiar with the parks folks. So, and it's conceivable, nobody in the state has much money right now. Nobody anywhere has much money right now for sure. But there still are pots of grant money, including, I think, things like Prop 1 and environmental enhancement mitigation, if there's any Caltrans projects nearby, which I think there are a few.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe the other quick thing I wanted to say was make sure that we figure out exactly where the property owners are, because some of it's Carp Sanitary District and some of it's parks. So I think that would be a really important thing to find out, is who's the actual property owner, and get them involved too, because I think that's another consideration.
Yeah. There is, I didn't bring it up. Yeah, Rob, go ahead.
Yeah,
Rob
Virginia, will you be communicating directly with Dolores about this?
Sure. I don't know who I should report back to. There was a whole raft of
Either Dolores or Lori, either one.
yeah. I was figuring Lori, but yeah, I'll definitely let them know.
I'd rather not paraphrase you. I'd like them to hear it from you.
Sure, I can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And John, just to go with a little bit of what Virginia was saying, when I was looking at your map, I thought, why fence? Maybe a nice large shrub that we put there with a path that kind of blocks their area, but allows us to still walk there.
Yeah, I didn't bring it up, but one of the main concerns that Cesar Romo has mentioned in talking about this issue is there's been some theft recently. So that has heightened concerns from the residents there. And that's why they're talking about, restricting that access, because they feel like their stuff is being stolen and they have to get some control of this. But yeah, and the other thing that's potentially relevant is, when I talked to the Carpinteria planning, community development department people, I talked to Nick Bobroff, one of the planners there. And, first off, he said, we have not heard anything about this project, which is actually consistent with what I then heard from Cesar, like, there's no project. So, stop saying there's a project. But he pointed out that, there is, this is going to be in the, oh yeah, bye Virginia. This is going to be in the appeals zone for the Coastal Commission because it's adjacent to the estuary. and it's close to the shore. There is likely to be a coastal development permit required for any new fencing that goes in. The city has existing ordinances regarding fencing that are especially strict in the area of environmentally sensitive habitat, which the Carpinteria Creek corridor is. So he said that would put some significant constraints on what kind of fencing could even go in there. Like it would have to be animal friendly. And he thinks that like chain link fencing is explicitly prohibited in that zone. All of this is very preliminary, and he hadn't seen any, project details to really talk about. So this was all just sort of general information. But it does make a point that, any sort of adjustments there is going to be potentially complicated and involve a lot of different players, including the sanitary district and the state park and the city.
I love the idea of creating a mutually enjoyable and beneficial passage there. I also would caution, I'm not sure we definitely want to go down the road of wholesale scouring out of the vegetation of the creek bed there in order to improve the passage or whatever. I don't know if one would be dependent on the other, but I would want to just be cautious about that, because as you said, John, and I didn't actually know that it has never been channelized. And that's clearly one of the things that continually makes it bird friendly.
Yeah.
So I would just say going down the road of a grandiose big improvement project might not be beneficial all around.
Yeah, and the one other, so I wasn't sure any of this was going to be relevant, but I'll just throw it in there because we're talking about all these issues. One other thing I did talk with Cesar Romo about, and with Nick Bobroff at the Carpinteria Community Development Department about, is that there was an emergency project done at the northeastern corner of the sanitary district plan about a year ago, where they created like a cement embankment there with some rocks and stuff in it and took out some of the creekside vegetation. This, I believe, if I'm correctly remembering the conversation with Nick, this was done under an emergency permit from the Coastal Commission in the wake of the big floods we had, and that part of the sanitary district plant was being undercut and that bank was eroding rapidly. So that piece was put in there. But there's actually a follow-up project happening now where they're going to go in again and do additional reinforcement of the bank and probably some additional vegetation removal for some distance north of that point. So if you're familiar with walking that embankment next to the sanitary district plant, at the northern end of that, the point where you reach the grassy verge that we've been talking about next to the housing. From that point forward, some distance, and I don't think it's a lot, but I don't know how much it actually is, there is going to be some sort of project going forward involving the state park, I think, and the sanitary district, because the bank is continuing to be undercut in that location and they're concerned about future storms. And that's being done via the permit process with the Coastal Commission. So it's not going through the city of Carpinteria. So I don't have much information about it, even from the Planning Commission side, because it's not their project. But that's likely to be taking place. Seems at least potentially possible there might be some mitigation opportunity to say, oh, maybe if we can establish some more permanent sanctioned access for bird watchers past this area as part of this, that could be helpful. I mean, mitigation would probably be more like habitat restoration and habitat improvement, which, as a birder, I would be even more in favor of. Does anyone want to share anything else? Have we left anything important off? I mean, I'm basically viewing this as a win, even if it's mainly a win in the sense that, taking Caesar at face value, that there wasn't the threat that a lot of us were concerned there was, or there wasn't as imminent a threat as a lot of us were concerned that there was. This is probably, from my perspective, the best outcome that we could have had, which is that it basically goes away, or at least the concerning part of it with the imminent creation of a fence goes away. Yeah, Rob, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just thinking it might be a good idea not to bird that little section, but, park on 6th Street and just walk quickly through it to get to the sewage treatment plant if you're going to go down there.
Yeah, that was specifically something that Caesar asked me to convey to, as part of this meeting. And if I didn't do that earlier, I'm happy to do it now. His feeling is that the temperature has risen and there's been, a certain amount of bad feelings on both sides. He would like very much to kind of back off on that a little bit and let the temperature subside a little bit. And if people can avoid going through there or can do it in a, can access the area in a way that does not tweak the noses of the people who are concerned about birders coming through there, that he would encourage that. You can access the area from the south, he pointed out. I think I mentioned that back at the beginning. You can currently, if you're willing to, be a little strenuous, you can drop down into the creek bed and walk the creek bed past that section. You won't be able to do that if we get some decent rain because the water levels will rise and it'll be a lot harder to do that. But yeah, I would certainly encourage, I think everybody here is aware of this. And if other people end up watching this video, if I post it and make it available to others, that we have an arguable legal right to access that area is one thing. To exercise that right, with some restraint may be helpful in terms of, navigating this situation and maintaining access in the future and doing it without creating, ill will that we didn't need to create. I know very avid birders who've been accessing that area for a decade or more are probably going to continue to access it. I would just, maybe with some messaging, we can at least make them more sensitive to the issue and just be aware that, this is a sensitive spot. And while you're enjoying the birds, maybe give a little thought to the people who are not as bird oriented, who are, have a different attitude about you coming through there.
Has there been any link to the residents of the housing complex to the north? Has this ever bubbled up with them?
You're talking, so there's the Singing Springs condominium complex that's basically between 8th Street and 6th Street. I don't know exactly what the status is there. I mean, there is basically a grassy strip, as you know, between Singing Springs and the creek, and birders have historically walked it. There is signage there now that I don't know if it was there until a few years ago that says no trespassing and, keep out. Mark Holmgren sent me an email just yesterday, I think, mentioning, yeah, I see Mario saying he's tried to unmute every which way. Yeah, I'm sorry, Mario. It would be great to get your perspective on this. Well, unless you can pantomime it, we can do a little charades. First word, sounds like, no. But yeah, it's great to have you here. And thanks for your emails, informing me about what was going on there. Mark mentioned there's some, looks like some containers, like storage containers, like sort of, shipping crate size storage containers that have been placed on the bank there next to Singing Springs towards the southerly end, towards the 6th Street end. You can actually see it from 6th Street. And he had some concerns about that might be an unpermitted thing that the, coastal commission or the city might be, have issues with, and that it's sort of an encroachment on the riparian habitat there. I don't know anything about that. I've tended to not walk that stretch as much because I'm a little more sensitive. Like you're walking past people's living rooms, basically. Like sometimes if you look in that direction, there they are, in their condos. And, I mean, the birds are certainly fascinating. I mean, if I can drop down and bird that section in the creek bed, that's what I've typically done because the birding is better that way anyway. But yeah, it's potentially a concern. It would be wonderful. It'd be a dream to have, an actual sanctioned kind of trail through that whole stretch of creek because it is such a unique piece of habitat. But I'm happy we can get access to it as we do currently. Anything else? Yeah, Rebecca?
I think that we could, as you have suggested, proactively send a message on the listserv, make some really clear messaging known that it is a sensitive area. That's that grassy strip there. If you are going to access the creek along the sewage plant, move quickly through that area. I think you can just be really frank and say, this is a place where families now live, and we all know that language, but I wonder if it makes sense or not to even post something, an actual a signpost that says birders, for people who don't pay attention to SB co-birding, or who, I don't know, maybe it's not good to be that welcoming. I don't know, maybe the state parks wouldn't be so thrilled that we were saying, hey, you can be here, just do it this way. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think it would be a thing that I'd certainly want to coordinate it with Cesar Romo, but it might be something he'd be in favor of. I don't know. I mean, he's in kind of an interesting spot right now, where I think his district superintendent is sort of reined him in on talking about putting in fencing, and he would probably just prefer that this whole issue kind of go away and not be one more thing he has to contend with. And maybe putting up signage, or being part of putting up signage, would imply a degree of sanction that they don't want to do. But it's worth exploring, certainly. It's a good idea. And I'll be happy to post a follow-up message to the listserv and talk about, where the issue stands, because I know there was a lot of interest in it. A lot more people, had sent emails who weren't in this call. And I can, post a copy of this meeting on YouTube and give them access to go watch it if they want to, if they have nothing better to do with 45 minutes when they could be out birding. But
I think as personally, for me, what it translates to is anytime I encounter anybody who might be a resident there, that's an opportunity to be friendly and welcoming and very respectful of their space. And not that they're right or wrong, that this is their property or not, but I think anytime you can take that opportunity to, you want to see what I'm looking at? Look at this, kind of really welcoming the reason that we're there. It's always a good idea.
okay, well, I agree 100%, and I think that's a good note to end on, unless anyone else has anything else they want to offer. Rob, I see you, Rob Lindsay, saying you need to check out. So I think we've done what we came for. Good job, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much, John, for doing this. It's nice that you took up the mantle.
Well, I was happy to help out as best I could, and again, look forward to go see those birds there soon when I get back in town.
Cool.
All right, bye everyone.
Bye.